Welcome back to In the News. This episode, we're debunking myths about the clean energy transition perpetuated by fossil fuel proponents. Recently, we've come across an uptick in advertisements claiming that clean energy is unreliable and has a minimal impact on climate emissions. What strategies do they use to convince people to stick with fossil fuels, and what does the research actually show? You'll often see these ads reframing climate change as a challenge to meet the public's growing energy needs, calling for additional research before transitioning to renewables, and labeling climate policies as damaging to U.S. prosperity. They also warn of energy poverty to suggest that decarbonization would take a socioeconomic toll on the U.S., making fossil fuel lock-in the right thing to do. These claims mirror rhetoric used by fossil fuel companies to downplay the seriousness of climate change, while suggesting that fossil fuels are our future. These companies have known about the catastrophic warming caused by the fossil fuel industry since the late 1970s, according to their climate models. But instead of communicating these harms, they have deployed powerful and lasting messaging to delay the renewable transition. These misleading claims create confusion about and ultimately discredit clean energy solutions while making fossil fuels seem more favorable. Myth 1. A renewable grid cannot meet demand. Clean energy detractors argue that renewables cannot produce enough electricity supply to meet growing demand. Fact. Numerous studies support the fact that a decarbonized grid can maintain resource adequacy to balance its supply and demand. A meta-analysis of 11 studies found that a 70 to 90% renewable grid would be able to match supply and demand, which is consistent with the Department of Energy study finding that an 80% clean grid would maintain full reliability. Even grid operators agree. A renewable grid is not a pipe dream, but a real possibility. Additionally, demand for clean energy is not as political as advertisements make it out to be. 4 of the country's top 5 solar electricity producing states in 2023 voted Republican in the last 3 presidential elections, as did the nation's top 4 wind producing states. Everyone benefits from clean energy. Myth 2. Renewable energy is not reliable. You can see this myth used in this ad funded by Core Natural Resources, a Pennsylvania coal company. Renewables can't do it all. Coal provides the constant, dependable energy that progress and growth rely on. Reality. A robust field of study suggests that a renewable grid can maintain resource reliability. Conventional generation is experiencing its highest level of unavailability to date due to poor gas-free performance during extreme weather events, and major blackout events have increased by more than 60% since 2015. There's no more local example of the unreliability of the current grid than Winter Storm Elliott, when gas-fired electricity generation facilities accounted for 70% of the outages across the Northeast. Conversely, renewables supported almost half of the electricity demand in Texas during extreme heat waves that forced higher than usual fossil fuel outages, telling us that renewables are critical to maintaining grid reliability as aging infrastructure and extreme weather events increase. Myth 3. Renewable energy is not worth the investment. Another ad funded by Core Natural Resources argues that the 2% reduction in worldwide fossil fuel emissions over the past 20 years is evidence that renewable energy investment is not worthwhile. Fact. This statistic misleadingly includes emissions data from countries that haven't yet invested in renewable energy, skewing the data and perpetuating a narrative that renewable investment makes no impact. Countries that have made a significant investment in renewable energy have seen significant carbon emissions reductions. For instance, over the past 20 years, the US invested $559 billion in renewable energy, and carbon emissions fell 17%, highlighting the efficacy of renewable investment. One can only imagine the emissions reductions from greater renewable investment, both in the US and worldwide.